Hello, my name is Ford and I'm a master's student in environmental science at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. I'm here to talk about my poster, which is looking at modeling the impacts of fire on the forest soil water nexus in the Catskills. So, to give a little background into the motivation of this study, climate change within pretty much globally, but specifically, I'm talking about the Northeast, is expected to have an increase in temperature and also an increase in precipitation. However, with those changes in precipitation, we're going to expect less frequent but higher volume precipitation events. And during the interim, in between those different events, we're expecting to see an increased risk of drought. As a result of that drought, there's going to be a lot of vegetation drying, and that subsequently is going to increase fire risk, particularly in the Northeast. You look at the graphic that I have on the left, it's a study looking at predicted change for fire frequency. And within the Northeast and New England and New York, we're seeing an over 125% increase in fire risk in those regions. To pivot to talk about the regions that will be burning, there's a lot of forest in this area, and that's kind of the other graphic that I've included in this presentation. We're seeing a lot of different types of forests with a lot of different tree types, and all these forests are really important for economics, for cultural and recreational purposes, but also they're very pertinent to a lot of ecosystem services where the forest is actively purifying water that is entering large city systems like New York City and also performing carbon sequestration. And so the increased risk of fire in this region poses a really big issue because when those forests burn, they're potentially going to see a loss of those ecosystem services and other benefits, but also it's potentially going to change how water is moving through those systems. On the other hand, a lot of the fire, forest, and water studies that have been done have predominantly only been done in the western portion of the United States. And so this is a really large knowledge gap within the Northeast that we don't really have a lot of people looking at this issue, and we don't really have a lot of data either. So that leads me into the methodology for this particular study. I will be using the simultaneous heat and water model, which is also known as SHAW, to provide an in-depth look at water partitioning. Water partitioning is effectively how water is parceled out when it's coming into a system through precipitation, how much of that water is being evaporated, how much of that water is entering groundwater, how much of that water is leaving the system as a river or runoff, and how much of that water plants are using to transpire. And so I am using this model to essentially calculate all of these different things. It's a one-dimensional model, so I'm looking at the tops of my trees in my forest site in the Catskills, all the way down to the bedrock. And then I'm using this other software that from the USGS called the parameter estimation software, and that essentially expedites this model calibration. Models are simulations, and so they're not representative of actual real case situations, but with a calibration, I can kind of match my model results to the data that I've collected in the field and try to get a representative model that gives me a way to infer how water is being parceled up in this system. And so that leads me to my hypothesis, which is fire disturbance will alter the hydrologic properties of the soil, which is not really a big surprise. We've seen this in the western portion of the United States. However, I believe that these changes will be influenced by fire fuel type and fire temperature, which is going off of research that I'm collaborating with. A lot of the empirical data for this study is provided by Mariah Lagram. She did a lot of work in the Catskills looking at different soil cores. She collected them, tested how water is moving through them, did some burn experiments with different fuel types on top of them, and then tested how that water hydrologic conductivity is moving again. And so I'm essentially hoping to use some soil moisture data that both of us kind of installed these soil moisture probes in the ground to calibrate my model to as the real data. And then I'm going to develop a calibrated model so that I know that my model results are matching the real world situation pretty well. And then I'm going to take the burn data from her hydrologic cores that she's done with these different fuel types and add those into my calibrated model and use that to inform how water partitioning is going to happen post-fire. Thank you so much.